的，大家午安哈，非常高兴又看到大家了哈。很抱歉哈，我还是必须戴着口罩，因为大家可以听得出来，因为我还在感冒当中哈，为了大家的健康着想。OK， 好，我们简单的哈，用中文来主持这一场哈。好，那好，我们这一场的主题我想就像刚刚司仪所提到的话，我们今天接下来要探讨到一个这个尤其针对选举年非常重要的一个议题就是在这个选举的干预的问题那是在任何一个国家之内的这个政治势力是从由内或外进行资讯的操控 ，election interference。Information manipulation by political forces in and out of the country。好，那我想今天早上我们其实已经花了2个小时的时间讨论到这个亚洲的地缘政治那还有媒体跟这个每一个国家里面的这个外交政策还有这个内政等等之间的关系。那我们到了今天的下午的这一场那我们呢也进一步的探讨，尤其是从资讯操作的这一个角度来看那当然资讯操作其实它是一个两面刃那可能境外势力的资讯操作尤其在现在整个地缘政治中美角力的这个格局里面那俄国还有中国当然被视为2大这个所谓的专制威权的集团而且他们非常擅长的对民主世界进行资讯跟认知作战好，那当然从对于亚洲国家来讲一个部分是如果在一个专制威权的亚洲国家里面那这一些所谓的境外的资讯操控它是真实的存在，还是它有时候会成为专制国家它在内部用来压制内部异议声音的一个借口那这个可能我们在有些国家里面确实也看到有这样子的一个倾向，或者是说到底用来压制内部的意见的这一个声音是这种亲境外势力，也同时用来反制去消解所谓的这个境外认知作战的一种说法那我想这个情形是非常复杂的因为这个会根据每一个国家它在这个地缘政治里面的位置它在这个民主联盟或者是这个专制联盟之间所扮演的角色以及它国家内部的不管是认同政治分歧等等那所以它其实在这么复杂的这些因素的作用之下当然我们就要来请教这些专家了好，那我们今天呢其实各位可以看到在我们现场呢有4位来宾好，那也请容我一一的介绍那其实在我的最右手边的这一位我相信大家已经很熟悉了因为我们早上这个李奇柱先生NBC 的这个专业记者、政治记者他早上已经参与了我们早上的一场论坛那当然呢，他准备为我们分享的内容都不太一样那李奇柱呢，他有一个很重要的采访的经历就是他揭露了这个南韩的总统尹锡悦访美的失言的风波那非常勇敢的揭露这个新闻呢。那作为一个政治记者他也遭到了政治的报复包括说这个总统采访专辑拒赞然后呢也遭受了网络上面的匿名的死亡威胁等等然后也被迫要接受司法调查好，所以其实当一个记者，即使是在一个民主国家，其实风险还是蛮高的。那等一下李奇柱先生他会跟我们分享这一段经验那我想从这些他从事这个记者采访工作以来2008年以来他一直坚守着记者的接力的这样的一个很重要的新闻专业理念那他等一下会跟我们分享这些过程。那接下来我们的第 第二位在我的我就是抱歉，我就照着这个座位的顺序好，那在我的右手边呢是泰国我们来自于泰国 Today 的总编辑好，那总编辑是I hope I say your name right Noppatjak OK Noppatjak Attanon OK sorry about my bad pronunciation Noppatjak OK 好，那 Noppatjak 呢他说他是一个那个10几年前第一位首先在用 Twitter 这个平台来报道新闻的一个记者好，然后呢他除了这个做新闻报道之后呢他也取得了一个很重要的奖学金到英国去念了国际新闻学的这个学位，也跟 BBC 的泰语部门合作好，那2017年他回到泰国那就变成了是 Today 的总编辑那这个 Today 呢是在泰国是一个非常有影响力的网络的原生媒体有读者有上百万那同时他也主持节目一个叫 An Hour 的一个全英文的节目然后透过这个节目也拉近了泰国和世界的距离好，那接下来在我的左手边那我的左手边这一边是 Mr. Anil Sasi right OK, thank you. 好，那 Sasi 呢，他是印度的所谓的印度快报是 National Business Express 好，那他是那这一家印度快报它是一家英文报社印度已经有成立90多年历史的第一家英文报社那Sasi 先生他在这个媒体的很重要的深耕呢，是主要其实是在这个商业新闻上，所以他非常擅长分析金融科技跟全球的财经议题那他最近有几个很重要的相关的报道那跟选举有关的，就是在选举年的时候使用 AI 的竞选叙事，还有它对于选举结果的影响然后它对于印度的财政然后经济的分析都是非常深入的好，那最后一位呢，我们也很高兴我们有我们的台湾的代表队我们的政大国家发展研究所的教授，然后他同时也是现在的代理所长黄兆年老师好，那黄兆年老师他本身是政治学的学者好，可是他其实对我们传播研究贡献非常的大因为他从政治经济学的观点关心台湾内外的人权跟民主的发展。那这几年他有非常重要的著作就是在分析中国的崛起以及中国对于包括台湾还有邻近国家的新闻自由所造成的影响好，那所以黄老师也参与了很多篇很多本专书的编辑跟发表那很重要的是有一本《吊灯里的巨蟒》去探讨中国因素作用力跟反作用力。然后呢，最近几年这几本我都这个很认真的研读瑞士力制造机谈中国在台湾、香港、印太地区的影响力操作与中心边陲的拉锯战那我想就是可以从黄老师的背景可以得知，他可以为我们好好的解析今年的总统选举中国的整个认知作战的一些细节跟它的影响是什么。好，所以这个今天就是我们下午场非常精彩的语坛的阵容好，那我们今天呢所以我想我们就依照我们在这个议程表上面所表列的这个顺序，所以首先我想要请这个first of all I want to invite Mr. Anil Sasi to give your presentation to us. Thank you very much. 所以我们想so do you want to sit here or do you want to use the podium there? Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. As I say, the most dreaded time to speak is the post-lunch session when stomachs are full and minds are drifting, so I'll try and make the most of the time given to me. The topic is extremely relevant given the fact that we just had a general election that concluded. In fact, much of it was during this month, the early part of this month, and the results came out just a few days back. So I represent the Indian Express, but my views here are largely personal. I won't say my organization concurs with everything that I'm going to say, but yeah. So okay, this looks like a screensaver, but it's not. It's the world's highest polling station. The photo was taken on June the 1st. This place is called Tashigang. It's in the state of Himachal Pradesh. It's about the polling station is about 4,500 meters high, and these are people who are going to cast their ballot on the 1st of June. Just a little bit about the Indian elections. The numbers are always staggering when it comes to India. 970 million registered voters of some 650 million people cast their votes. The whole thing was managed by some 15 million polling and security staff, and a total cost of some $14 million. That's the total estimated cost of the election process. And there's some 2,600 odd registered parties, but much of the spending was done by the top 5-6 parties. And so far in India's elections, it's domestic issues that have dominated. It's for the first time this time around that we had a slightly changed nuance. Firstly, just in the run-up to the elections, there was quite a bit of in the build-up itself. There were allegations that there's a foreign hand or interference, some sort of interference, especially from the West. That's a little unusual because these kind of allegations generally in Indian elections are restricted to countries in our geography, either Pakistan or the most China. So the trigger for that was also a few things that happened. There was the arrest of a sitting chief minister just before the election started, and the US and Germany, the representatives in India, the envoys, had spoken about this, and that had not been received very well by the Indian government. Then there was a release of a human rights report by the EU Parliament, which also was not very positive. And in the early part of May, US Secretary of State Tony Blinken had released a report that talked of some human rights abuses and violence in a northeastern Indian state of Manipur. So all of this had led to a certain backlash from the government in the run-up to the elections itself. And this bit about this foreign hand conspiracy, but that's a hypothesis that's generally used by government, but the Indian government included, to essentially discredit those who oppose them or say something negative. It's very easy to use that, and silencing critics, well, it helps sort of mobilize public opinion against the people who are raising something, and the foreign hand thing really works in that context. And one way that it's been manifesting is in the way of targeting of civil society, NGOs, research organizations. Those who have been critical of the government, they have invariably seen that their foreign funding licenses through which they can receive money from abroad, those have been cut off. Some of it is also done to deflect attention, and that's been working. A bit about the Indian media before we talk of how manipulation works. India is one of the few markets where media is growing. Even the print side of the media is growing especially in smaller languages, which are called vernaculars in India, languages like Telugu, for instance, which is spoken in 2 southern Indian states. The numbers are huge again. It's a total of 96 million people who speak the language, which is 3 times the population of Thailand, just plus one language. So these are the segments where the print media is used. The other good thing is that newspapers and magazines, essentially print, is still considered among the most trusted news sources, followed by television, radio, broadcasting. Online is still way behind, and that's also because there's a lot of discretion that comes in when it comes to online media propagation. But there's a change in the trend with smartphones coming in, digital media is booming, and a lot of people, especially the younger folk, consume their news online. On WhatsApp, YouTube, some social media channels, including Facebook. The problems with media in India, well, I can think of many, but three sort of are fairly, they dominate. One, of course, is the fact that the owners of news media entities in India typically tend to have other businesses, majority of them. And that is where they are most susceptible to, the pulls and pressures of those in power. The other problem really is that Indian media is not really shifted to the subscription model. They're trying on the digital side, but the bulk of revenues still come from advertisements, and a big chunk of that is still government ads, or ads that are given out by state-owned companies, or private companies that are aligned to the government, or possibly the government can have some degree of influence in saying whether to shut off the tap to a particular media outlet in case there is a problem, in case they're critical. And the third point is about these large corporate houses buying up independent media outlets. And this is something of recent vintage where company news organizations that are seen as slightly controversial inevitably get bought up by an industrialist who's invariably close to the dispensation, close to. The other thing is enforcement action, essentially by the use of probe agencies and tax authorities on media outlets. I have listed out 3 instances, but there are many more. BBC got raided, or they got a search just after they put out a slightly controversial documentary on riots that happened in India in 2002. There were raids on NDT, CBI raid, investigative raid, and this was seen as an independent TV channel, but it ended up being bought by one of the biggest companies, groups in India that seem to be close to the dispensation. So, and that's something. This is a point that was touched up in the first session. Sukita and others talked about it. The entry to government offices is progressively being restricted, which essentially means you can only go in by appointment. If someone gives you an appointment, it's very clear who your source is. It's easy to identify who's given you a certain news, and so most government officials are reluctant to meet the press. Understandably. There was a very interesting study. It's called the Global Disinformation Order, which was put out by the Oxford University. It's slightly dated, 2019, but it talks of how manipulation happens on social media, but also of print journalists or TV journalists. But the harassment happens on social media, where an army of trolls will try and bulldoze you or bully you in case you put out something that is seen as seen as negative by the government, or it impacts the government's functioning in some way. You can be sure that there will be a bunch of guys who descend on you on social media. These are again some of the toolboxes, things were referred to earlier as well, but essentially there's restriction of private information, and there's a whole host of cyber incidents. The website crashing after you put out something, and not necessarily because of the traffic. Especially the news is slightly negative. It targets a political group, essentially the the party in power or the government. And till 2018, we really thought that Cambridge Analytica and the way in which manipulation of Facebook users' perspectives were done by that was probably the extreme case. But AI can completely change this dynamic. In fact, make it much worse. This is by way of both magnifying the scale of disinformation, creating really hyper-realistic deepfakes, and enabling micro-targeting. In the sense, messages can be sort of really fine-tuned to who it goes to. The same message can go in different ways. So this gentleman, this is from a it's a screen grab from a political rally that happened about a month ago, and this is a case in point. The way I will use, he's a South Indian politician. The visual on the right is of him delivering a speech. The only problem is that he died in 2018, and this speech was used, which went viral. It wasn't made clear when was recorded. This is obviously an AI-generated thing where he was saying that his party is doing a great job. His son, who's now leading the party, is the best candidate for chief minister, and that I'm in heaven and I'm meeting all my political adversaries, and this is what I've learned. And this was in a state that is not very. Actually, the rally was in places where literacy is a little low, and people tend to sort of buy into it. And inevitably, the governments tend to have much more control of data and thereby more leverage over the use of AI tools. Apart from that, obviously they can use it. They have control over electoral funding. That's a raging issue in India, where money is heavily sort of the balance is tilted in favor of the government. Then there are malware tools of the kind that NSO's Pegasus, which was used across geographies in other countries as well, but in India it was used to target opposition leaders, journalists, and obviously very clearly, it is bought because NSO only sells to the government. It is bought by a government agency or the government. Fact checking, the government again selective fact checking. It uses its own agency to fact check any news on the government, and obviously, it's a party in the case because it's interested in what the news is. And of course, post-pandemic, we've seen greater amount of controls that governments are exerting over citizens' data. That started with contact tracing for health issues, but that's now visible everywhere. It's visible in our airports, railway stations, where face recognition is an accepted sort of practice. So what are the solutions? Well, some of the solutions were alluded to in the earlier session. But I think most important, which would work in a country like India, would essentially be citizens exerting more pressure on the government to disclose where they've collected the data from, what they're putting it to use, and who they're giving it to, who they're selling it to. And those things are not very clear. The other thing, of course, is independent credible fact-checking, if it can be done with bipartisan oversight, like a parliamentary panel overseeing a fact-check organization, rather than the government doing it, as in the case of the earlier example I mentioned. Then there's also, there are templates from other geographies. Global Engagement Center. This is a body in the U.S. State Department that does what is called pre-bunking, essentially. If a false story is detected, it will sort of convey to its partners, including journalists, including civil society groups, to say that to tag it, to say that this source has put out a false piece of information, and that would essentially mean that people would be much more sort of sensitized to the dangers of that, and perhaps would be more skeptical if that kind of news comes out, or at least would view the agency with skepticism. Then there are other things that Switzerland-based International Panel for Information Environment, they do this blocking or labeling of specific users or posts on digital platforms which is something that slowly some Indian organizations have started to do in collaboration with independent fact-checking organizations. There of course the need for media literacy, that's something that Finland is doing, for instance, and tighter verification requirements on digital platforms. That also progressively the government in India has moved towards. But the problem there is where to draw the line, because the minute you start regulating them, you will do it in a manner that that could perhaps distort the field of it. The biggest thing really is building broader-based partnerships between agencies that can work towards flagging offending posts, which is working in other countries. One case in point is what FEJA, which is backed by Retail Capital. They've been doing it across some 60 languages through the use of the IFCN, which is part of the economic network, essentially to improve media literacy and to point out fake news instances as and when they happen. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you for Mr. Sasi's sharing about government-controlled media and international flow. And then we will invite Mr. Lee from NBC to share your perspective. Thank you.
Korea is the only divided country in the world. Whenever there was an election, the ruling party would take advantage of division of North and South Korea. One example is the Korean air bombing incident in 1987. Ahead of the president election, there was a bombing of Korean air flight by North Korea. And a day before the election, the government transported bomber to Seoul and broadcast live. The scene made culprit with a gag in the mouth influenced the entire nation in fear and shock. As a result, the next day, this scene played a decisive role in the ruling party's candidate being elected as a new president. I think that this attempt would not be possible without the cooperation of neighboring countries, such as US, Japan, China, etc. Another example is the incident during the 1997 presidential election. Ruling party officials met North Korean officials in Beijing. They requested a military demonstration at the ceasefire line in order to increase the security concerns and their approval rating for the ruling party candidate. Whenever North Korea launches an ballistic missile ahead of a South Korea election, it often boosts people's concerns for security and giving ruling party an advantage. But lately, it has been bad because the information gap between the people and the government reduced through the SNS and internet tools. But recently, manipulation type is changing. In Korea, opinion poll politics also become a famous buzzword. The results of political opinion polls are released every day. The media broadcasts these results live every day. Ahead of this election, more than 1,900 polls were conducted in Korea. However, as you see, the results of each opinion polls are a bit different, and the range of numbers is too wide. As a result, opinion poll organization is becoming more and more powerful. However, controversy over bias and distortion continues. The results, depending on the organization tendency and correction method and how to collect the sample, cause to lose the trust in themselves. Too many opinion polls already become a social problem because opinion polls create new opinions. It seems intervening to election. I will tell my story. During President Yoon Suk-yeol's visit to New York in September 2022, the so-called hot microphone incident occurred after meeting President Joe Biden. At the time in New York, President Joe Biden announced the US would donate $6 billion, and President Yoon also announced donate $100 million to underdeveloped countries. After two presidents met briefly, President Yoon said to his staff that sentence in Korean language. The remark is caught on the reporter's camera. At the time, I was in New York and I found the video at the first, and NBC was the first media to report it. However, President's office was silent for 16 hours, and 16 hours later, they claimed the complete different sentence. They denied. He says Biden. He says 날리면. 날리면 means in Korean meaning is blow away. Blow away means 날리면. Biden and 날리면. This pronunciation, I think, is not similar. The majority of the Korean people laughed at the President Yoon and his staff's excuses. If you add 날리면 in the sentence, the meaning of a sentence becomes strange, and sentence does not form normally. Even 날리면 is a slang term. President Yoon said he does not remember what he said, even after watching the video. As a result, they are trying to punish me for defamation of the president and violation of the national interest. Is this a matter for police to conduct a large-scale investigation? I don't think so. I earlier said Korea is a paradise for opinion polls. At the time, 4 opinion polls were conducted asking how do you hear, Biden or 날리면? As a result, more than 60% responded Biden. Around 25% responded 날리면. Opinion polls about the hearing, I think it's normal. It's a sad comedy. President Yoon, he still didn't tell the truth and stubbornly continues this situation. Even Korean court ruled the NBC report was wrong because judge was not sure what the president said. As the court ruled, Korean people ridiculed the court as out of date, anachronistic. Actually, covering the president is not easy because information is limited and access is difficult. But still, I wrote many scoop articles about President Yoon's problem and his wife's problem and President office problem. Each time, I was isolated by other power-friendly colleagues and authority-friendly reporters, and isolated from journalist community. A representative example is 2 months before the hot mic incident. I reported exclusively President Yoon and his wife's secret secretary involvement in the presidential affairs. My report and articles put President Yoon in big trouble in Korea. From then on, the government recognized me and my company MBC as an enemy. And they suppressed me, and they insist my reports are all fake news. At last, I'm being investigated on the charge of defamation of the president, and I'm receiving police summons notice again and again, even the day before yesterday. But I'm rejecting this because I don't think there is any reason to be investigated. It's bothering and harassing me. If I went to the police, I probably wouldn't be here today. All I did was very simple. I write articles, the president's incorrect conduct, state affairs, and incorrect remarks, and I emphasize the improvement needed to president, but result is being sued, and I'm still being bothered. The government and the ruling party used this situation as an opportunity to suppress me and NBC. I can no longer be a political reporter. And only NBC reporters suffer discrimination by being kicked out of the presidential plane. So I protested strongly. Coincidentally, my argue with the president's staff broadcast live, and I suffered death threats from president followers and many YouTubers. Terrible situation. The politicians criticize reports unfavorable to them as fake news. Fake news attacks have already been weaponized. Korean government and authorities are now claiming that their personal thinkings are the truth and put the pressure on the people to believe that authorities saying is truth. The court also coldly go along with the powers. It's very dangerous for politicians to attack journalists by calling a fake news. Doxing attacks, the targeting individual journalists, is becoming more frequent and causing hatred and anger. Same case, me too. Journalists have no choice but to endure this alone. Everything written here in the RSF statement is that I experienced and faced myself. RSF issued a statement criticizing indiscriminate attacks and complaints against NBC and NBC reporters, me, by the present power. It's an attempt by those in power to silence critical media. However, I'm still withstanding and fighting against the attempts by political force to manipulate and control the press. I'm worried these anti-intellectual actions are all taken on the guise of freedom. I am living witness to doxing attacks in Korea, as I reported the truth and was hated by those in power. And when I confronted them, I was disciplined and suffered death threats and terrorism threats. Government frequently try to intervene in public broadcasting. They appoint critical reporters to place unrelated making news and exclude reporters from newsroom. Not many journalists stood in solidarity with me. However, paradoxically, I became a journalist who received the most support from the people in Korea and became a symbol of media resistance. I will remain in this position without change, like now, as journalists who resist no matter what threat there is. Thank you.
好，非常感谢李先生用他个人的亲身经验，告诉我们，一个新闻工作者要监督政府，是有多么的艰难，那我想，包括我们刚刚听到的印度的经验跟韩国的经验，就是那政府他要用来控制或者是这个打压对他批评的这一些言论的时候，好像他们很常用的就是 fake news。那我们当然都很清楚嘛，Trump 最常用这个 fake news 去指责，批评他的这个敌对的媒体，那或者第二个说法就是，这个是境外势力干预，intervened by foreign forces，好，那所以就说这几个，就说所以到底。所谓的 fake news 真真假假，它到底是一个真实的资讯操作的威胁，还是它其实是一个执政者或者权力者，他用来转移注意力或者是用来镇压异议声音的借口，我想这个其实我们还有很多的国家的案例，我想确实是可以值得大家在今天的这一个场次里面好好的可以去做讨论，好，那接下来呢，我们就邀请到我们泰国的这个Noppatjak来谈一下，那在泰国的经验又是如何呢？Noppatjak, please.
Thank you. Let me check something first. Whether I will sit or stand. Okay, cannot sit. Can I sit there? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Noppatjak Attanon. That's a Thai name, and my nickname is Aim. So we need a nickname in order to communicate better because Thai name is quite difficult. I understand your pain. And I would say for a start, I'm gonna be here for 2 days, and I'm gonna be on the panel 3 times. So in total, 45 minutes. And we will try my best to use this 45 minutes to make sure you know more about Thai politics, election, and media. Because I know that Thai politics can be as spicy as it's good, and at the same time as complicated as well, right? I assume because this community is full of journalists, so you know a lot about Thai politics, but at the same time, the politics itself, especially in Thailand, is very complicated, right? So I know that because whenever I go abroad and people ask about Thai politics, it takes longer for me to explain to them. You know, like 10 years ago, it would take 30 minutes, right? And then 5 years ago, it may take 1 hour. Right? Now, it could take the whole night to explain to them everything. Yeah. And just before we getting into politics, I want to introduce myself a bit more. My name is Aim. Currently, I am the editor-in-chief of a private news organization. It's a private company. It's mainly online. It's called Today. So today we have 45 people. When I say people, it's including, you know, like administrative staff, reporters and everything. But we actually only have like 10 to 15 journalists that covering stories and produce the product. But further in my background, I used to be a journalist running in the field. And when I was a freshly graduate, when I was start my early career 15 years ago, there was a big political turmoil in Thailand, right? So back then, I guess a lot of you know the main colors in Thai politics, which is yellow and red. And this is why I brought so many bottles here. The fact that there are so many bottles here, not because I drink a lot, but I want to make sure that I illustrate politics in manners that visualize it to you so you understand, right? So 15 years ago, there was two main colors, which is yellow and red. Back then, you know that they are enemy, right? It's yellow versus red, simply put. But today, they are together. See? Amazing Thailand. Amazing Thailand, right? So what happened in the journey of the last 15 years and what is happening now? Wait, I want to check if there is anything you want to use here. No. I don't need to use anything here. Come back here. Okay. This is 15 years ago. The red and the yellow. So, was it 2014, right? 2014, so it was 10 years ago. Oh, happy anniversary. Happy anniversary of the coup d'etat in Thailand. So the coup d'etat caused by who? Military. What color? Green. Their uniform. The color is uniform. So back then, 15 years ago, when they have a big fight, the coup d'etat stopped the fight, and then they take over the government. So these two are kind of dispersed, right? So 10 years ago, back then, and you need to factor in that aside from politics, there are also media disruption, right? So there are two stories now. Maybe I have to stand up now. Okay. There are two stories now. Okay. The key timeline is political, and then the second timeline is media disruption. So back then, 10 years ago, there was a major 6 television channels in Thailand, and maybe 10 newspapers, right? Channel 3, Channel 5, Channel 7, and newspaper, maybe you have heard of Thailand, Daily News in Thailand. But then there was a big big media disruption that from 6 television is become 24 TV channels, right? So there's a huge change because with that disruption, it's more difficult for the country to control the narrative. Back then, if I'm the government, if I'm the establishment in Thailand, I can say, oh, let's have a meeting of like 20 people. The 20 people may be the editors of TV or televisions in Thailand, and then the government can spread. They can send the message to the whole country of whatever they want. So it's easier for them. But nowadays, back to the second story, aside from the media disruption, there is another disruption, the third story now. The third story is the social media disruption as well. So back then, when there were like maybe 10 major medias, nowadays in Thailand, there might be 1,000 medias out there that publishing stories and try to catching eyeballs from the audience. So that for you to understand more about what's happening in Thailand, right? Back to the main story, to the politics. So after the coup takeover in 2014, they were in control for they were in control until the election happened in 2019, right? So in their narrative from the from the military, they say, okay, right now we rewrite a constitution. We should be able to control the election, right? And all they see and all their life, including all my life and all Thai people life, the colors of politics are only red and yellow, right? Here comes the contenders, which is the orange. Yeah, I would say the orange because there are now two parties under the orange camp. It was the Future Forward Party 5 years ago. They become a challengers because aside from the red and yellow party who become first and second in election, now they become the third in terms of voters in the country. So in the last, in the election before the last one, since 2019, so it was 5 years ago, in the last 4 years, there are a lot of changes in terms of both election, politics, media, and social movement in Thailand, right? By the way, I have mentioned 3 main stories, but I haven't mentioned one key story. I would say the main story, the key story. Then I'll bring the yellow, the purple color here, right? The topic about the monarchy. And I have to tell you that what I'm saying now is only 5% of what I am thinking. Okay? Because this is still recorded and I still need to go back to my country and work in my media business. So this is only 5% of what I am thinking. If you want to know more about the 95%, meet me over dinner, okay? So you know, the key event that happened in the last 10 years, that was 12 years, huh? The transition from King Rama IX to King Rama X. I will put it in a very short summarize. What's that? This transition play a big part in politics, media, and election. Okay? Only 5%, that's all. Okay, this one. The rest, dinner, okay? And I have to say that the fact that I'm kind of used to presenting news and affairs in the entertainment or in the humorous manners, because this is instilled in a lot of Thai journalists, because there are so many things we cannot say, but we need to find a way to send a message. We need to find a way to get what we want to say across. We may use cartoons, we may use sarcastic, and humor is one of them, right? Because we still need to be present, we still need to live in a healthy manner, so we cannot get depressed all the time and just like living a bad life being a journalist. So we find a way to tell stories. Okay, back to the main topic of the major election. How many do I have now? Do I go over 50 now? How long do I have now? Did you set the clock? Okay. How long do I have that? In 5 minutes, okay. This is the first chapter. I'll be here for another 2 chapters. Okay, it's okay, right? First, all the good series come in 3 trilogy. Yeah? So last year, 2023, it was an election. Right? So everyone in the country expect the same old story. Red or yellow. The yellow there might be some, like sub-party. It could be blue, it could be purple, something like that. But basically, it's a red and yellow. It's always been like that. It's always been the old power versus Thaksin. right? It's been like that for the last 30 years. But then the result of the election came to a surprise because the Orange Party, by the way, it's the second Orange Party, okay? It was the future forward in 2019, but now they have to rebrand themselves and become the move forward party, right? So they won election. Coming in first, no one predicted that. I worked in politics and media for 15 years. I believe that I was so good in polling. I thought the best case was that they might get a tie. It might be a, like a close tie with the red party. But they shocked everyone, including themselves. If you really ask them, like, did you expect to win? None of them wished. I know a lot of them inside the party, they were like, when they get the result, they were happy. We won the party, we won the election. And then they were like, how are we going to arrange the government? Was quite a big, because the Orange Party consists of the young generation. They are like 25, 30, 40 years old. The leader of the party is 45 years old. Imagine people my age, people my age. Of course, we want to change the society. We want to run a good campaign. But then without expecting it, I won election. And now I have to govern, right? But at the same time, the Green kind of find a way to manipulate not the result, because the result was obvious. Manipulate the way to form the government, and at the end, right now, all the colors are becoming allied and sort of isolate the Orange Party. So when you check the result in Thailand, it has its own character. It's just like the food and the country and the Thai people, Thailand is very unique. So the party that won the election, now pretty much the sole party that is the opposition in the country right now. The rest are allied and govern. Okay, so that's pretty much the first chapter of Thai politics. I think I have used up my 15 minutes. The next 15 minutes I will come back and I will talk to you more about what happens with this media and journalists. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for sharing us about the current politics in Thailand. Actually, I expect more about the media role in the election. So maybe, we should not wait for another 15, maybe before the end of this section. We would like you to share about the role of the media. And then let's welcome Professor Huang Jaw-Nian to share about your research.
我想我就在这边跟大家报告比较轻松一点。大家好，很荣幸有机会在这边做分享。那虽然我讲的是台湾的主题，可是要请大家容许我等一下报告的时候用英文啊。我们 Q&A 的时候，当然我们也可以用中文来讨论哦。那主要就是刚郑丽老师很担心我讲不完啊，看我简报很多，然后我最后一个Panelists 最后一个发言啊，所以我的确有点时间的压力。那其实我问过主办单位啊，我说如果超过15分钟没关系，他说请你控制在20分钟以内，所以我准备了一个讲稿啊。我保证20分钟以内没有问题啊，所以反而是如果临时换成中文啊，可能就不小心讲太多啊，所以为了节省时间，让大家有讨论，那请容许我用英文来报告。So hi everyone, it's my pleasure to be part of this panel, and it's also my pleasure to be here to have the opportunity to share some of my research results. As the last speaker in this panel, it seems to me I'm under some time pressure. So I was told I need to finish my presentation in 20 minutes. But actually I prepared a lot to share, and I'm afraid I speak slowly. So please allow me to just read out the note I prepared in advance to avoid the situation in which I use up all the time for everyone to fall asleep. Okay. So anyway, I'm going to talk about China's information operations in Taiwan. Because of me. All right. So basically, my presentation will focus on foreign forces. This is because, as you may know, according to FEJA, Taiwan has been ranked as number 1 around the world for several years. This is already not news. Unfortunately, this is not good news because we know that Taiwan was ranked number 1 because Taiwan suffered from foreign government's dissemination of false information. From a comparative point of view, compared to like India, Thailand, and South Korea, the countries where our panelists come from, Taiwan is outstanding. Taiwan received much more serious impact coming from foreign government dissemination of disinformation. At the same time, from domestic point of view, to see that the main source of disinformation in Taiwan is not from domestic government. It's also not from domestic parties. Disinformation in Taiwan mainly comes from foreign government. Either foreign government spread disinformation by itself, or foreign government may sponsor or provide advertisement to some agent in Taiwan for them to spread disinformation or misleading information on social media or something like this. Okay. So basically that's the reason why we may want to pay attention to foreign forces. It seems I may need to speed up. So before talking about Beijing's information operation in Taiwan's election, I would like to share a framework based on my research. Okay. My research basically shows there are 3 channels by which Chinese government could do information operations to Taiwan. So first, Chinese government and official media may directly spread disinformation to Taiwan through internet, through social media. Why? Because Taiwan enjoys a high level of internet freedom, which of course is good. However, it also makes Taiwan vulnerable to foreign influence. Here's an example. Global Times, 环球时报 maybe, as a Chinese official media, had ever produced a fake news which said China is going to have a large-scale military exercise in Taiwan Strait, and which would be a live fire one. Because during that time, Taiwan's Prime Minister Lai Ching-te claimed to be a practical worker for Taiwan independence. Lai Ching-te is currently Taiwan's president. But in the end, in fact, we know there was only a small-scale military exercise. It's a regular military exercise. Okay, people realize it's actually a fake news. However, during the days before the exercise, Taiwan's stock market experienced a sudden decline. Okay. So, which shows fake news coming from Beijing may have direct influence and real influence on Taiwan's public opinion. According to my research, the second channel for Beijing's information operations to affect Taiwanese people is to use economic interests to mobilize some specific collaborators in Taiwan. That means that basically Beijing may make use of economic market channels like ownership market, advertising market, circulation market to provide financial interest to some Taiwanese media outlets and mobilize this media outlet to create disinformation to spread misleading information in Taiwan. For example, Huang China Times relies on investment interest and advertising interest coming from China. Before the 2020 presidential election, Huang China Times created fake news which said KMT's candidate Han Kuo-yu was monitored in Singapore by Taiwanese representative, and Han Kuo-yu's speeches and activities were reported to the ruling party PPP. That's fake news. Another example is some internet marketing companies also rely on Chinese market. And before the 2020 election, a marketing company paid advertising fees to some influencers in Taiwan for these influencers to post some articles and photos on Facebook and Instagram with a hashtag like showing my voting commitment with a gesture which is considered a signature gesture of KMT candidate Han Kuo-yu. Is another example. Still another example is United Daily News rely on advertising interest and circulation interest coming from China. From last year, before the 2024 election, it reported a fake news which said the ruling BPP government was working with the United States to invent biochemical weapons. So all of these basically show to us the role of specific collaborators in Beijing's information operations. And according to my research, the third channel is to use the bias of information itself to mobilize non-specific collaborators in Taiwan, which involves the so-called mobilization of bias in political science, 偏差动员 in political science, in which if there is a certain piece of information, some people may like it, other people may dislike it, but both of them may have incentive to spread it because both of them are stimulated by the bias of the information. Could be the material bias, could be the ideological bias. A typical example is the Kansai airport incident in 2018. During that time, there was a flood in the Kansai airport in Japan due to a typhoon. So many tourists were caught in airport waiting for rescue. There was a fake news coming from China's content form, which said Chinese embassy is able to send shuttle buses to the airport to rescue these Chinese people. However, Taiwanese representative office failed to do so to Taiwanese people, and Taiwanese people identify, if Taiwanese people identify themselves as Chinese, then they could be saved by Chinese embassies. So we could imagine that in Taiwan, pro-Chinese unification media would like to spread this news. Why? Because they may say, see, China model is efficient, and the DPP government is not efficient enough. However, at the same time, anti-China media and pro-Taiwan identity media would also like to spread the news. Why? Because they may say, see, Chinese government is so bad, trying to unify Taiwanese people even in such a disaster. So according to my research, anti-China media like Apple Daily during that time and pro-Taiwan identity media like Sasi television reported the news even earlier than China Times and United Daily News. So I don't think they received money from China. So basically this example shows how the bias of disinformation itself may mobilize non-specific collaborators. So based on this understanding, let's talk about China's information operations in Taiwan's 2024 election. My observation is, in terms of the role of Chinese government, in terms of the way Beijing mobilized local collaborators, and in terms of the topics, the content of the information itself, the overall trend from 2020 to 2024 is like a change from a more direct approach to a more indirect approach, from a more open, straightforward approach to a more under-the-table approach. In 2020, Beijing tend to mobilize specific collaborators in Taiwan, like Huang China Times, to create, spread disinformation, fake news, which is more directly related to the candidates themselves, like韩国was monitored in Singapore, like Taiwan's former president, Taiwan, hold a fake PhD diploma, which is another fake news, also widely spread in Taiwan during that time. So they could try to create new issues, try to lead agenda setting in the campaign. However, in 2024, it seems to be Beijing's more influential approach is not to mobilize specific collaborators in traditional media, but to mobilize non-specific collaborators in social media. In terms of the content, the more effective approach in 2024 is not to spread disinformation, but to spread biased information or misleading information, which has nothing to do with true or false. It's also not so effective this time to spread information directly related to the candidate, but it's more effective to spread information not directly related to the candidate, like American skepticism, like anti-war narratives, something like this. And also in terms of timing, the more influential approach in 2024 is not to create new issues, but to make use of current issues, current affairs, which Taiwanese people already pay attention to, like Ukraine-Russia war, like Israel-Palestine conflict, or something like this. So for example, American skepticism may guide people to link the war to the United States, then link the war and the United States to EPP ruling party, then potentially link peace to China and to pro-China parties like KMT, and finally potentially affect Taiwanese people's voting behavior. According to IORG's survey between 2021 and 2023, there are 8 types of American skepticism, including 84 different narratives. Chinese authorities play a role in creating 33% of them and spreading 83% of them. Most of them said United States is like a fake friend to Taiwan. It makes use of Taiwan and won't be willing to protect Taiwan and will bring about chaos and war to Taiwan. According to Academia Sinica's China Impact Survey, there is division in Taiwanese society in terms of Taiwanese people's attitude to the United States. Like 62% agree United States is an untrustworthy country. 43% don't think United States would send troops to assist Taiwan if China were to attack Taiwan. And 56% think a closer relationship between Taiwan and United States doesn't make Taiwan safer. This attitude to the United States may be reinforced by Beijing's information operations. According to IORG's survey, we could see from this picture, those who watch Huang China Times are more likely to believe in American skepticism compared to those who watch other television channels, which shows the role of local collaborative media in Beijing's information operations. In addition, those who use TikTok are more likely to believe in American skepticism compared to those who don't use TikTok. Similarly, according to Double Think Lab survey, those who use TikTok, WeChat, and Xiaohongshu are more likely to believe in American skepticism compared to those who use Facebook, YouTube, and Line, which shows the impact of information operations on Chinese invested social media. So, how does China's information operations affect Taiwan's democracy? It seems to me there are two things we should pay attention to. One is political polarization. Information operations tend to reinforce the original division in a democracy. When Pan Blue tend to believe in a certain piece of disinformation, Pan Green will tend not to, which lead to the so-called echo chamber effect, or political polarization, and in turn impact on democratic communication process in Taiwan. Another impact is cognitive construction, especially for median voters, because they don't have even assumptions and ideas on many issues. So information operations may shape their cognitive frames, shape their views, affect their voting behavior, and potentially affect democratic election outcome. Based on Academia Senica's China Impact Survey, we found Pan Green tend not to believe in American skepticism, but Pan Blue and median voters are more likely to believe in these narratives, which shows the effects of political polarization and also cognitive construction. Moreover, we also found those who believe in American skepticism are more likely to disagree that democracy is the best political system all the time, compared to those who don't believe. So which shows China's information operations may also have impact on Taiwanese people's identification with democracy. So there's the last slide. To respond to China's information operations, it seems to me what we could do is to strengthen our media environment and our information environment to provide people more diverse information to compete with disinformation coming from China, and to encourage people to do media literacy as well as China literacy and international literacy. So we could counterbalance authoritarian influence coming from China. I will stop here. Thank you.
好，非常谢谢黄兆年教授从他的研究特别去分析了就是说台湾所受到的尤其是以中国为主的资讯操作的影响而且这个资讯操作不只是讯息其实它也包括中国透过各种的财政上面的补助去影响台湾的媒体好，非常谢谢我们4位语坛人这么精彩的分享那当然现在看起来我现在看到的我们的时间大概还剩下半个小时好，那我希望很快可以就是让我们现场的朋友可以来提问那我想听了刚刚几位的分享回到我们今天的主题我也想请我们各位语坛人可以再稍微想一下，因为刚刚我们听到了印度我们也听到了韩国，尤其谈到的是这个主流媒体跟政府之间的一个监督，或者是相对是一个比较对抗的关系，然后也看到政府的用什么样子的控制的手法来希望去控制媒体对政府的不利的言论那我们好像比较没有听到2位语坛人谈所谓的境外势力对于2国的公共舆论的影响那我想从这个部分当然我想尤其我们在亚洲国家，我们其实非常关心的是中国的大外宣或者是中国的资讯操作因为它当然不只要影响台湾它其实也希望可以影响这个国际社会，不管是对于中国的 管是强化中国的正面形象，或者是强化反美的论述等等，或者是说去影响介入每一个国家内部的这个舆论。所以我想就这一点是不是说请我们的语坛人也想一想，那可能也包括在泰国，那去为我们可以分析说你们在各个国家所看到的中国的资讯操作，对在你们每一个国家的，尤其在网络场域上面是不是形成了一定程度的影响？好，那我想请我们的语坛人先思考一下，同时我就直接也把现场开放给我们的朋友们。好，那我们收集几个问题之后，我们也请等一下语坛人他们一起来回应，这样好不好？我想这样可能会比较时间上我们会比较能够控制的好一点。好，那我已经看到 Chris， 然后还有我们后方的那个天下的正义3种编辑哈。好，我们先请2位来。
你好，我是 WFP 的 Chris。我特别想要问民意调查这个问题。在2024台湾的大选中，有一个非常不知道是独特的现象，就是民意调查它变成是操弄选举的一个工具。然后刚刚也非常意外，就是韩国好像也有类似的经验。那是不是可以请几位讲者分享一下，说媒体从业人员在不同的选举脉络的情况下，你们是会怎么样用民意调查这项工具？谢谢。
好的，好，谢谢 Chris。然后我们接下来请天下杂志总编辑陈一山。
Question for Anil. I think you mentioned that sometimes the foreign media always publish some poll or some criticize some survey about your president and gives me some criticism. I just wonder, do you think there's a foreign manipulation for your India population? This is my question for Anil. And also I'm quite curious about the Korea situation. I just wonder, because you have some unfriendly treatment by your journalist colleague and also the government. I don't know what's the institution. Do your NBC protect you or give some support on that? Is my question for you. And my third question is about the general, because everyone mentioned the media literacy is very important. I just wonder how to do the media literacy in your mind. Thank you.
OK， 好，我们现在其实问题蛮多的所以我想我那个 take a break， 其他的朋友想问问题的话，我们下一轮。所以我们接下来我要请我们的4位的语坛人就刚刚我们几个共同问或者个别的问题可以来回应好Are you ready? Okay, good. 来
In questions, I raised first is about the Chinese influence. So I think the main struggle of Thai media and Thai people right now is economics. So when we talk about Chinese influence, there are two set of influence. Mainly, well, if we talk about media itself, it doesn't influence Thai media and politics. From China doesn't really influence Thai that much. Of course, there are some attempts from Chinese news agency like Xinhua. I work as an editor, so I get approached by Xinhua all the time to use their news on our channels. But we can choose whether we use it or not. At the end, we not using a lot of it because it doesn't really interesting, right? So that's in terms of media. There's not much going on there. But in terms of economics, I have to say that there's a lot of influential power from China because they are number one of the top tourism target. A lot of Chinese tourists come to Bangkok and spend a lot of money, right? So for Thai people, a lot of us know what's going on. And in the last 2 or 3 years, a lot of Thai people are actually uneasy with Chinese capitals, with Chinese business that like open up Chinese restaurant in the middle of downtown Bangkok. because it's kind of disrupt Thai local business. So we are not comfortable with that. But in the end, there's not much for us to do. But right now, there are some balancing back because a lot of Chinese business doesn't really do well in Bangkok. But at the end, we have to admit that Chinese money is a big money in this game. So a lot of us, we kind of know what's going on. But at the same time, Thai people, they need to support their family. So they need to counterpart, they need to work with Chinese business in order to survive. That's mainly. I traveled to Taiwan with Kun Phanuk, who worked for Reuters. Maybe he can add more on Chinese event. Not yet. Okay. The second one, that's mainly about China power in terms of media, politics, and business. Is there any more question? Yeah, the polls. Yes, we received the polls. Yes, even about the Orange Party winning the election, there are 4 major polls in Thailand. There's only one poll that say that Orange Party will win the election. But the experience and the knowledge that we learned from the last election was that the best poll is the Google Trend. The Google Trend gives the best percentage. When I said Google Trend was that in Thailand we have the early election, right? The election for the people who cannot attend the real day. So it always takes place 1 week before the real election, right? And the people who search, they go search how to vote Orange Party, how to vote red party, how to vote blue party. The percentage is actually the same with the result. So if you want to know more about Thailand, you may use Google Trend. I think that's the most organic way to find the real result of Thai sentiments. Thank you.
I will invite Mr. Sasi.
And answer the lady's question. So I was not trying to say that what the reports contain are appropriate. What is happening is that the reports are being used by the ruling dispensation to say that there are foreign actors who are trying to influence the voters or pass judgments on what is seen as our internal process. The election process in India is seen as our own internal business. So someone from outside coming on the report that shows India in a bad light is used by the government to say that look, the timing of this is orchestrated and it is coming now to malign the government, to malign India's image outside. And that sort of talk has a lot of resonance outside India. In India, the current government is very much focused on this nationalistic fervor. It wants to beat the drums and say that we are the guardians of the image of India. We are the only ones who can safeguard India's position. So in that context, it works to their advantage if they use some report that comes in to say that they brought this in to show us in a bad light. Look at the timing. We just come just before the elections, and it's all motivated. And the opposition is talking about it, and they are selling into the hands of those who are sitting targeting them. So it is in that line. Otherwise, very clearly, India has fallen on a lot of indices. The press freedom index is one. The human rights reports that have come in clearly show that India has slipped. It's gone down. But the government uses it to its advantage to say that all of this is disinformation. And it is being done on the behest of some Western power only to malign India because they are not happy with the rise of India as a growing nation. That's a survival. And that is the angle that is generally taken, and it works to the government's advantage. A lot of people who vote for the whole nationalistic movement they tend to believe, they tend to buy it, and they tend to associate the nationalistic governments as the saviors of India's pride, India's national. So that's the context in which I mentioned it, and why the timing was what something the current government sort of used to do. I hope that answers it.
Or during election or media editors?
Yeah. No, before that, the Chinese, the foreign influence thing, the point that you raised, look, in India, it is not such a big issue so far. It's not like in Taiwan where, China was the shadow of China is looming. Till now, traditionally, the only major countries that India sort of sparred with are smaller countries in the background who have essentially been used for political purposes. Pakistan, only because it's largely Muslim dominated and really, other than the fact that we fought to war, it's largely okay, and we play cricket together and generally we lose. I mean that's the only problem. Otherwise, there's not much issue with Pakistan. China clearly is a looming danger. It's a country with which we fought a war. It's a country with which we share the longest land border. It's a country with which, at 2 locations, we are currently having a problem. In the sense, there are skirmishes that are happening. We only get to know about it when soldiers die. But on a regular basis now, there are fights. They're not gunfights, but the physical fights where people are dying, people being clocked to death. That sort of stuff is happening. So China, to my mind, is the big danger. It is also a country that is very, very, it takes news about itself very seriously. So our government is also, very diplomatic when it sort of, when it puts out stories about perhaps Chinese interference in the elections. It will be very careful about it. But yeah, India's banned TikTok. India's banned a lot of Chinese apps, to essentially ensure that the influence of China is restricted. But it's less to do with influence in the election so far, and more to do with, actual physical confrontation. So more military problem at this point in time, and how it pans out going forward. That's it.
And Professor?
I would like to talk about media literacy. I know many people are concerned about media literacy, and everyone knows it is important. It seems to me that before media literacy, there's a lot of infrastructure we need to establish in the first place. So the first step is that how could we do media literacy in an environment filled with disinformation? So the first step is always to establish, to develop a diverse media environment, diverse information environment. So that's the reason why public broadcasting system is so important, right? It's so important, right? So at least we could secure some professional, diverse media sources, information sources there for people to do media literacy, right? In addition to public broadcasting system, we also need to have some professional, diverse commercial media, as well as citizen media, independent media. Okay, so all of them may provide enough, sufficient, diverse, alternative information to this information, right? So that's always the first step. And another point I would like to say is I'm not so worried about the capacity of media literacy. Right? Everyone is smart. Everyone has capacity to do that. I'm worried about the habit to do media literacy. For example, when we buy food, buy milk from supermarket, we always know we may want to check the production date. We may want to check the expiration date, right? So we have habit to do that, okay? But now, in terms of what we watch, what we read, could we also have such habit to do fact checking in advance, to media literacy. So that's another conclusion habit in addition to the testing.
Okay, so be careful. Just check the fact before you swallow the information or distribute it to your friends. Okay, the last we will invite Mr. Lee to respond to our audience question.
한국의 상황에서는 역외 세력의 정보 조작 같은 것이 생각보다 많지 않습니다. 한국이 생각보다는 상당히 폐쇄적인 사회 구조이기 때문이죠.
说到我们说那种境外的这种势力，它所影响，比如说选举也好，或者是什么样也好，它捎来一些那个假讯息之类的。那比起可能大部分的人想象，韩国是比较封闭性的社会，因此呢，它这种境外的这种假讯息进来的普遍呢，整体来讲是蛮低的。
중국 얘기하셨는데 한국어의 그 구조가 생각보다 문장을 만들기가 상당히 쉽진 않습니다. 그래서 중국에서 몇 번의 시도가 있었지만 이건 누가 봐도 한국인들이 속지 않을 정도의 그 조잡한 문장들로 구성되어 있었기 때문에 무슨 성공한 바가 없었고요. 오히려 역외 세력이라고 하면 저희는 분단 국가이기 때문에 북한의 간섭이 더 심각한 중국보다는 심각한 문제입니다.
我们如果是要这个散播一些假讯息或假消息，你总是要有文字或什么的。但是就是韩语的结构啊，会说话的人和写文章的人其实蛮有限，就是你要能够写。如果是说我们特别要提到中国的话把它当作是一个境外势力的话，其实中国他如果要想要去影响你，他一定要写韩文。可是他写的多好，那个文章一看就知道是外国人写的，所以他们很容易分辨，他不会被骗。所以这个就是他们为什么比起台湾对它是有影响。但是我们相对的，同样我们会想到朝鲜半岛南北韩，当然北韩它用同样的文字，它就可以会影响，所以他们会防范这一点。
그리고 여론조사가 한국에서 제가 너무 많다라고 말씀드렸는데 그렇다 보니까 다들 여론조사 결과를 한 번 쓰고 버리는 소모품처럼 여기는 경향이 있습니다.
还有像比如说我们碰到选举一定会有很多的民调，那因为韩国呢，民调公司也好，或者是民调机构这方面的讯息非常非常的多，因为它多到这个媒体啊或什么，大家都拿来看一次，大概就是用一次就丢掉，有一点像是这个消耗品的感觉。
모두가 자기에게 유리한 것만 골라서 발표를 하다 보니까 여론조사 결과 발표로만 따르면 아마 모든 선거에서 각자가 다 당선자일 겁니다.
由于是因为他调查的机构太多，因此呢，就是说你可以有选择性，我们都只选自己想要看的、想要听的。也就是说，你如果只看到每一家他所提出来的那些民调的结果的话，你会发现每一个候选人都会当选，因为他只选择他要的。
그래서 한국에서도 미디어 리터러시에 대한 교육이 상당히 중요해졌고 지금 많이 진행이 되고 있습니다. 특히 여론조사 분야에서는 너무 범람하다 보니까 이것을 어떤 서로의 가중을 둬서 다 묶어서 하나의 추세화하자는 그런 움직임이 나타나고 있습니다.
有跟像比如说我们说媒体识别率是非常的重要的，因此呢，韩国也知道它很重要，所以现在其实是他们正在进行，就是想要提升这样子的这个媒体的识别率。另外一个就是民调，当然有很多民调非常的泛滥，因此呢，他们现在想要做的是未来这个民调它出来并不是整个就散播就好了，而是说有一点像是我们来做一点加权这样子，把它重新整理，然后把它再做一个发表，他们现在正在进行当中。
팩트체크도 상당히 강화해야 된다는 움직임이 있는데 그 팩트체크라는 기관도 너무 많이 생겨나다 보니까 팩트체크 결과도 제각각이고 그렇다 보니까 정부가 직접 팩트체크를 하겠다고 해서 사회적 문제가 되고 있습니다.
像我们这里也有像比如说那个要假讯息什么的，我们去查证的这种平台。那个我们通常讲的fact checking 那种地方。那韩国呢，这个 fact checking 也很多，就是太多，多到你的结果同样的新闻结果都不太一样。
那现在就是政府就觉得说啊这样不行，所以政府说他想要自己来做，政府来主导，那人民就会觉得这个又不能相信，所以这个也是一个大混乱。
정부가 팩트체크를 하면 그것은 자기들 입맛에 맞는 결론을 낼 것이 뻔하기 때문이죠. 그래서 한국은 아직 미디어 리터러시가 진행 중이고 좀 더 아직 자리를 잡지 못했지만 교육이 더 많이 진행돼야 할 거라고 생각이 됩니다.
因此呢，刚刚有提到是说像尤其是一般的人民通常都会觉得说，如果政府来主导的话，当然他是想要什么政策，他才要做他自己喜欢做的，因此可能可信度没有那么的高，所以这也是一个问题。所以韩国非常的清楚，他觉得是说这个媒体是非常的重要，因此教育也很重要，它正在进行当中，是确实正在进行中。
그리고 아까 MBC 저희 회사에서 저를 지지해 주느냐 뭐 지켜주느냐 이렇게 질문을 하셨는데 현재 있는 그 지도부라고 할까요?는 여전히 저에 대한 지지가 있는 분들입니다.
刚刚有提到是说 NBC 是不是就是他的这个公司的 NBC 那有没有支持你啊？这样子有的，为什么？因为目前我们常讲说那个我们的高层，这公司内部的高层，他们都支持他。
한국에는 공영방송이 두 곳이 있는데 그중에 한 곳은 이미 현 정부가 이사회를 모두 해임을 했고 사장도 입해임을 했습니다. 그래서 비판적 기자들이 쫓겨나 있습니다. 뉴스는 대통령 친화적으로 바뀌어 있습니다.
就像我们的公广集团这样子，就是韩国的这个有关这种公广集团，它是非常的电视台是两大，那其中就是另外有一家那边的，其实是他的那个董事会跟他的总经理已经被解职了，已经被解职。那解职的同时就变成怎么样？原先他可能批判性的，也就是说他有监督到政府、批到政府的这些记者都被解雇。
안타깝게도 MBC는 9월에 이사회부터 모두 변경이 될 거고요. 정부가 새로 임명을 할 것입니다. 그리고 그렇게 되면 한 사장이 해임되는 똑같은 수순을 밟게 될 거고요. 그럼 비판적인 기자는 뉴스룸에서 쫓겨나는 상황이 반복될 겁니다. 아마 9월 이후에 이 포럼이 열렸으면 저는 여기 오지 못했을 겁니다.
因为像有提到是说，他公民电台公广集团的公民电台里面，就是另外一家，就是他的董事会解散啊，然后那个都被解职了，然后所有的批判性的记者都被解雇。那 NBC 的话，9月份就要开董事会，9月份开了董事会的话，因为政府它主导，因此呢，它可能会把这些人全部都换掉，换掉以后都要找比较亲政府的这样子的人进来。 所以批判性的记者都是，所以如果这个论坛是9月以后开的话，恐怕可能有一个在这里。
그래서 MBC가 지금 유일하게 정부의 비판 보도를 하고 있는 한국에서는 그런 매체인데 9월 이후에는 쉽지 않을 것으로 보이고요. 많은 분들이 한국의 그 언론 상황을 우려하고 있습니다.
所以其实到了9月以后的话，你会觉得说韩国 真的没有什么监督政府的那种媒体，说他可能没有批判性的，因为他不能批判，所以这个是其实蛮多人在忧虑的一个问题，因为一个媒体它根本没有监督的能力，也不能去批判什么，这是一个比较目前感到比较悲观的。
好，非常谢谢NBC 的李先生谈到韩国公共媒体的一些阴暗面是不是未来会有人事变化？但我想我们也希望我们可以继续关注我们的时间剩下最后的5分钟我想帮我们现场的听众再争取一点机会。有没有人想要针对我们4位讲者特别的提问，或者是一般性针对4位的问题？好，来，我们后面有一位朋友，我们右手边这边还有吗？还有吗？朋友想要提问？ 那如果没有，我们这个就是最后一个问题了。好。
Hi everyone, I'm Zoe from NCK, a political science PhD student. So thank you for your presentations. I had a question primarily for Mr. Lee, but also maybe if you have time, Mr. Huang would also like to add something to it as well. So there's clearly an issue of government intervention and manipulation of the media landscape in South Korea. And I'm wondering about another side of things. So the intervention in terms of censorship of North Korean content and government websites. For a long time, North Korean government websites have been banned in South Korea. Actually, it's not just North Korean origin websites, but websites about North Korea. To add in a little anecdote, I work for a tour company that offers tours to North Korea. This website is also banned in South Korea. Recently, last year, I think, South Korea also cracked down on a banning of North Korean influencers, which have been on the rise as well, believe it or not, including potentially contributing to the banning, to the removal of several influencers from YouTube, North Korean influencers from YouTube. In the Taiwan-China context, this could be equated to Taiwan banning like any mainland Chinese media. Some North Korean experts may argue that these influences, no matter whether they're propaganda or not, offer a priceless view into an already secretive and very isolated nation. There is also the issue impacting South Korea's freedom of speech and democratic nature. Naturally, such measures are put in place in order for national security. I think it's under the national security rule in South Korea. So I'm wondering what your opinion is on this kind of government intervention. Is it really necessary as a matter of national security, or is it both at risk of damaging freedom of speech and removing important information about North Korea? And also, if we have time, in the terms of Taiwan, in this context, with China's information manipulation in Taiwan, would the removal and censorship of Chinese media on various media platforms ever be a tactic that the Taiwanese government would ever want to employ? Or would this, is something like this already in place, or would this impact the democratic nature of Taiwan too much? Thank you.
Okay, further questions? To Mr. Lee and Professor Huang. So, maybe Professor Huang, do you want to answer first?
Okay, so the question is about media regulation. It seems to me that in the context of Taiwan, government need to play a role to do something. Why? Because as for public good, for national security, or freedom of the speech, both of them belong to public good. So theoretically, the government need to do something. But the question is, to what extent the government intervene in the media market, right? We don't want to violate freedom of speech, freedom of the press too much, right? So that's the question, how to make a balance. It seems to me we have a lot of different policy tools. And in terms of information production chain, we have different end. Like we have the end of production, we have the end of distribution, we have the end of recipient, right? So it seems to me we should basically adopt different kinds of policies toward different ends of actors. Basically, it seems to me like in terms of the end of production, in terms of the end of the source of information, basically more involves China-linked actors. Like specific local collaborators. To them, it's about national security issue. So I would say maybe we should have some harsher policy tools for them to require them not to do something bad. So maybe policy tools like restriction may apply here. But in terms of the end of distribution, like the media, okay. So it seems to me that could be specific collaboration, could be non-specific collaboration in the system. Okay. So maybe softer policy tools. We require them to do something good. For example, to be transparent, to take some social responsibility, to establish some fact-checking mechanism, to establish some disinformation management regulation mechanism. Something like this require them to do something good. Okay, so you can see that some policy tool may apply to this. And finally, in terms of the end of the recipient, basically non-specific collaboration. or even just common people like us, right? So it seems to me more softer policy tools need to be used to encourage them, not require them, encourage them to do something good, like media literacy and so on. So provide incentive, provide education, something like to empower them. Okay, so it seems to me for different actors at different ends of the information production chain, we should have different kinds of policy tools, sometimes harsher, sometimes softer, to make a balance between national security and the speech of the press. That's my insistence.
So it's very complicated considering freedom of speech and the complexity of information ecosystem. So it's not to ban or not to ban TikTok. That's not that simple, right? Okay, so the last we will invite Mr. Lee to answer the question.
저는 제가 한국 사람이고 북한과 지리적으로 가까이 있지만 한국 사람들은 한국에는 국가보안법이라고 상당히 강한 규제를 하는 법이 있습니다. 북한과의 접촉을. 그래서 북한의 사이트를 들어가 본다거나 하는 생각을 하지 않는 게 보통입니다.
身为一个韩国人，其实我们也是整个朝鲜半岛上北边就有北韩，但是因为国家安全的关系，我们有国家安保法，那国家安保法就有规定，就是说我们不能够随意的跟北韩的接触，包括像网络在内。
한국에서는 그런 북한의 인터넷 사이트의 접속 자체가 차단이 돼서 가능하지가 않고요. 그런 곳을 접속할 수 있는 권한은 정부로부터 승인을 받아야 합니다. 박사 과정에서 공부를 하는 사람이라든지 그런 특수한 경우에만 가능한 상황입니다.
像比如说就是在台湾我们可以连接上那个中国大陆的很多的那种网站很正常，但是就是在南韩的话，它没有办法连接到任何北韩的任何一个网站，那它是有被禁止的。那但是就是说，如果你真的很需要去上网去查他们的东西的话，他要透过那个有关当局，你要得到那个许可认可。那比如说你现在在读博士，然后你为了要这样子的一个研究，必须要知道他们这种有可能这样。
그렇게 차단되어 있는 사이트가 있다는 것만으로 보면 어떤 면에서는 그런 언론의 자유의 제한이다 이렇게 볼 수도 있을 것 같습니다. 말씀을 들어보니까. 그리고 지금 여기가 한국이 아니기 때문에 여기서 접속이 되는지 모르겠지만 저는 여기서 북한 사이트에 접속을 해도 한국에 돌아가면 크게 그랬던 사실이 들키면 크게 처벌을 받게 됩니다. 그래서 불편함을 느끼는 한국인은 없다고 생각합니다.
结论来讲的话，就是说对南韩人来讲的话，他没有办法去因为他是政府有禁止，因此呢，就是那个已经被他没办法去连接。那但是就是说，一般的南韩人他不会觉得他连不上北韩，所以他会觉得不方便，所以不太好奇就对了。他们就这个是他的结论。那主要是要这样子因为会想到说，为什么我们就不能连上北韩？ 为什么？那这是不是也是一种这个我们要知的权利，或者是说那种这个言论自由，你有这个限制，也可以这样子想而且呢，我刚好人到了国外来不过呢，我就算在国外，我用我的手机去连，不知道这里可不可以连，但是我连看的话，可能我回去又不知道会怎么样，就是也许会被去问话吧，因为他还是能够知道，政府还是能知道。不过就说结论还是想说。 不会觉得说，因为不能连上北韩，所以他们觉得不方便。
그래서 다른 선생님들이 보시기에는 그런 게 좀 차단되어 있으니까 좀 제한이 된 건 아닌가라고 볼 수 있겠지만 제가 생각할 때는 분단 국가와 아직 전쟁이 끝나지 않았다는 점 때문에 좀 특수한 상황이라고 생각을 하고요. 중국에서의 틱톡 문제나 이런 거랑은 조금 차원이 좀 다른 생각을 해야 되지 않나 이렇게 생각합니다.
不晓得这个这样子的回答，大家可不可以接受，或者是理解是这样子？因为讲朝鲜半岛的南北韩是这个 分裂的一个国家，它是一个彼此在分割的，所以说因为是分裂国家，所以彼此之间有一些限制存在。那是因为它是国情特殊，那所以呢，如果我们讲到台湾，可能会想到那个前一阵子也在美国也这个大红一时，就是那个 TikTok。那这样的话，台湾要不要进 TikTok？ 类似这样子的，他认为是以他的立场来看的话，好像跟南北韩的关系，跟这个两岸的这些的这个我们上网这种被禁止的感觉是不太一样的东西，就说是分开来可以去讲，所以觉得这个还是因为是国情特别的关系，不觉得南北韩的这个问题是他认为不方便，可是觉得台湾跟这个大陆之间的这个，他又觉得是不同的领域。
好的，非常感谢我们今天4位语坛人这么精彩的分享那让我们透过他们的分享，可以了解各国特殊的政治的状况，以及这个政治如何受到国内跟国外的力量的影响，还有媒体在这中间所扮演的角色那我想结论呢，我刚刚听了几位的分享，几个很重要的基本原则当然第一个要有公正独立的可以监督政府的媒体。那第二个呢，也需要有独立的事实查核机构而不应该是由政府来做事实查核我想这个国际的事实查核联盟有很重要的对他们的认证的组织非常重要的几个基本要求，就是不可以接受任何政治单位的捐助就是为了确保事实查核的独立性。那第三个，我想我们的语坛人也都共同同意的是，做好媒体素养让每一个公民都能够有好的所谓的这个接收资讯的习惯那其实有正确的资讯，才有办法去帮助每一个国家的国民在行使他们投票的民主的权利，以及做出正确的政治决定。好，以上就是我们这一场 panel 那到这边正式的结束，非常谢谢4位语坛人那请大家再给他们一次掌声，感谢。
谢谢Chen-Ling老师与4位贵宾。Thank you, our moderator, Professor Huang, and the 4 panelists. 那接下来的20分钟是我们的中场休息 tea break， 场外备有点心与饮料，那欢迎大家取用，请利用这段时间互相交流。那温馨提醒，会场内禁止饮食，请大家遵守。我们下一个场次是下午3点半开始，请大家在3点半的时候准时入座。Now we'll take a 30-minute tea break. Refreshment and beverage are available outside, so please feel free to help yourself and take this time to enter. A friendly reminder, food drinks are not allowed in conference hall. We will see you in the next session at 15:30. Please make sure to return and see you on time.